What do a train holdup, a hostage situation, and a child kidnapping all have in common? They all happened in a Wyoming ghost town.
Hi, I'm Brenda with Ghost Towns and More. Today we're visiting the ghost town of Piedmont, Wyoming.
Our story takes us to the southwest corner of the state of Wyoming, but its early beginning started with a man from England. English immigrant Moses Byrne came west to the Utah Territory in search of a better life in 1854. Seeing a business opportunity to build stagecoach stations along the immigrant trails in Wyoming, he and his wife Catherine eventually moved to a site known as Muddy Creek, just 13 miles west of Fort Bridger, where they built a station to service the needs of immigrants passing through. Another business opportunity presented itself when news that the Union Pacific Railroad had plans to build the Transcontinental Railroad right through the area where the Byrne family lived. The railroad needed ties for the railroad beds, and charcoal was also in demand for smelting in the refineries in Utah. The area south of their Muddy Creek station had plenty of timber for both. In 1866, Moses sent for his brother-in-law Charles Guild and his wife Marie, asking them to join his family at the Muddy Creek station and to run its operations while Moses relocated a few miles further south to establish a new town where the needs of the railroad could be serviced. Business prosperity never looked so good. At first, Moses named his new town site after the family name Byrne, but the incoming railroad felt the name was too close to other names along the route, so inspiration for a new name came from the wives of the Byrne and Guild families, who were sisters, and since they came from the region of Piedmont, Italy, they chose that as the new name for their town. Piedmont soon grew into a thriving town, and as the railroad built through, a railroad depot, a mercantile store, a schoolhouse, log homes, and other businesses were soon established.
It was originally a station for a lumber station, and they supplied the railroad with the lumber as they were building. Then later on it became a station for the railroad builders and the graders to come and stay, and then eventually her family, my family, came here and started the town.
Moses built 5 charcoal kilns for the production of charcoal needed for heating and smelting.
My great-great-great-grandpa Moses Byrne is one of them. He built the kilns. He also had a stagecoach station and a railroad station.
The supply business for the railroad proved to be a profitable one, and more people moved in. Ranches by the Guild family were established, and families had a good life. Since Piedmont was built in Native American territory, there were some notable incidents that took place, including one when the Byrne family was still living at the Muddy Creek station. One day, some Sioux Indians came by and spotted Moses' 2-year-old son, Eddie, playing outside. Without much warning, the Sioux rode up and snatched the boy before they could be stopped and rode off. By the time the family discovered what had happened, they knew the chances of getting their son back were little to none. One can only imagine what Moses and Catherine went through over the loss of their son, with no closure in knowing his ultimate fate. He was gone. Then, 2 years later, something amazing and unexpected happened. A Shoshone chief named Washakie rode into the station where the Byrnes were still living. With him was Eddie, now 2 years older.
And he lived with the Sioux Indians for a couple of years, and Chief Washakie was good friends with Moses Byrne, and he found him and he negotiated with the Sioux Indians and brought Eddie Washakie Byrne back to Moses when he was 4 years old.
Either way, one can scarcely imagine the tear-filled reunion the parents had with their boy. He was finally home. Incidentally, The boy Eddie grew to adulthood and later became the mayor of a town in Idaho. Another incident took place near Piedmont at the Guild Ranch. 16 of Washaki's braves broke into the home while Charles was away, demanding that his wife Marie provide them with firewater or liquor, but she didn't have any. Fearing for her life, she pretended to search for some whiskey while secretly sending her 7-year-old son for help. The boy rode to the burn ranch and men were rallied to rescue Marie. As the men came riding to the ranch, the braves knew they were in trouble and rode off. Marie Guild recognized most of the attackers, having seen them at her husband's store in Piedmont. When word of this incident reached Chief Washaki, he immediately sought out Marie to learn who the men were, as he intended to take swift action against them. Knowing that those men would face dire consequences from their chief for the trouble they caused, she decided to let them off and not reveal their names. Chief Washaki must have sensed the mercy and goodwill of Marie and had his own squaw make a beaded purse and a pair of moccasins for her as a token of his goodwill. When the Transcontinental Railroad was nearing completion at Promontory Summit, Utah in 1869, trains carrying the dignitaries from the Union Pacific Railroad and the Southern Pacific Railroad were coming from opposite directions across the country. They were coming for a national celebration for the driving of the final gold spike to commemorate one of the largest feats in U.S. history. The event was scheduled for May 8th, but Piedmont became famous for its role in a substantial delay.
When the railroad came this way and from the west and they met at Promontory Point, they were going to drive the Golden Spike on May 7th. And when they came through Piedmont, when the vice president came on the train and they were coming through here, there was a pile of ties in the middle of the tracks, and they wouldn't let them by. Because it had been rumored that they had bankrupted and they had to pay the railroad workers subsidy.
With bad deals and corruption going on with financing the project, they knew if they didn't do something, they would never see a penny for their work. Union Pacific's Vice President, Dr. Thomas C. Durant, was en route to Utah in his luxurious coach when workers blocked the track in Piedmont and held up the train. They uncoupled the engine and told the engineer to drive on while moving Dr. Durant's coach to a rail siding, demanding money for their pay or there would be no transcontinental celebration.
The engineer, when he got to Evanston, he wired back to Fort Bridger for troops to come and help, and the wire went through Piedmont, so when it came here, the telegrapher didn't send it on to Fort Bridger, so nobody came to help him.
Dr. Durant sent panic messages for help, but eventually word got back to Union Pacific headquarters, where the money was quickly dispatched to the hostage takers in Wyoming, and an engine was sent to retrieve the coach to be on its way. Dr. Durant finally made it to Promontory Summit, where the ceremonious moment finally took place on Monday, May 10th, 1869. Although the railroad was the reason for the establishment of Piedmont, it was also the reason for its demise. Ever searching for ways to streamline the transcontinental railroad route, the railroad companies commenced building the Aspen Tunnel on October 9, 1902, that would allow trains to bypass Piedmont and other towns altogether, in order to reduce the railroad grade and save 10 miles of distance. The tunnel was completed on October 9, 1902, which spelled the beginning of the end for Piedmont.
Around 1901, the railroad put a tunnel through Aspen Mountain, which bypassed the town, and there wasn't really high demand for charcoal. So after that, they pulled up the tracks, and the town soon later on became a ghost town.
As for Moses Byrne, he moved to Utah for a time with his wife, but back to Piedmont in 1903 as a widower, and passed away on March 22, 1904, at the age of 84. His grave is the most prominent at the nearby cemetery just east of the town site on the hill overlooking the once bustling town.
This is a headstone of my great-great-great-great-grandparents, three greats, Moses Byrne and Catherine Carden, and their children. And this is where Moses Byrne and Catherine Carden are buried.
Homes and buildings in Piedmont were abandoned, and many were either torn down or moved away. Descendants from the Byrne and Guild family live far and wide, with some members of the Guild family living nearby, maintaining the huge ranch that has remained in the family ever since. 3 of the charcoal kilns that Moses Byrne built still stand and were placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1971 and are overseen by the state of Wyoming. Only a few of the old wood-framed buildings from the town of Piedmont remain, attesting to the resourcefulness and ingenuity that once contributed to the building of the American West.